This podcast is a listener and reader-supported creative effort. Some amazing listeners and readers have chosen paid subscriptions to the Roast West Coast Coffee newsletter on roastwestcoast.com. They are part of a growing community of people who appreciate craft coffee, learning about coffee, and being inspired by guests on this show. If you are able, and this show has been going well, with the morning mug of your favorite coffee, please subscribe to the paid newsletter at roastwestcoast.com. Thanks for listening, thanks for subscribing, and thanks for drinking good coffee. Welcome back to the Coffee People Podcast, presented by Roast West Coast. I'm Ryan Wolt, and this is the show where we meet and are inspired by the entrepreneurial stories of coffee people. Today's guest is Bill Kennedy of the San Franciscan Roaster Company, or SFR for short. He's the head honcho, the CEO, and the owner of an American manufacturing company that builds and designs beautiful coffee roasting machines. In addition to having a really interesting entrepreneurial journey, Bill regularly spouts these little common sense nuggets of advice. So many, in fact, that I started writing them down, and I'm going to share them on the show newsletter, which you can find on roastwestcoast.com. If you want to see the beauty of these machines for yourself while you're listening, follow at San Fran Roaster on Instagram. It's the best place to see a wide-ranging gallery of the machines both from SFR and from roasters around the world who use them. You can also see SFR at the upcoming Specialty Coffee Association convention. It's in Portland in late April, and if you happen to be there, they will be in booth 253. I hope to run into you there. Right now, I've got a Columbia coffee that I brewed up in a French press in honor of Bill. That'll make sense a little bit later. And just before we get started, I want to set the scene a little bit. Bill and I were chatting over coffee during one of the many, many bad weather days we've had in the Southwest recently. It was storming outside my podcast booth in Southern California, and I don't think things were much better up in Nevada, where Bill, clad in a white beard, black-framed glasses, and a dark baseball cap, was set up on the other side of the screen. There is a bit of frisky audio during this show, but I promise the conversation is worth it. Wherever you are, I hope that you're already enjoying a good cup of coffee today, because it's time for this Coffee People conversation with the head honcho of San Franciscan Roaster Company, Bill Kennedy. On that note, Bill, thanks for taking some time to talk to me.
Oh, sure.
Welcome to the show, the Roast West Coast Podcast, Coffee People Podcast. We're here to learn more about you as the head honcho of San Franciscan Roaster Company. You mentioned to me just a minute ago about you were in public education. What were you doing before coffee came along, and was coffee part of your life back then?
Yeah, I didn't grow up being a coffee snob. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't enjoy it. Like a lot of people. And but there came a time, I guess, when I was teaching, and I was young, single, and I had a favorite little place. And I learned to enjoy coffee with cream and sugar when I went out to breakfast, and I enjoyed a cup of coffee for that. Again, it had to have cream and sugar. But then along came one of my brothers, and he bought a coffee house called the Looney Bean up in Mammoth Lakes. And so I started getting a little bit into the coffee scene and seeing what that was like. And really started, learning a lot, enjoying it, and then finding out what real good coffee tastes like, coffee well roasted, started discovering different flavor nuances and so on. And I don't mean like, vanilla hazelnut. I'm talking about actual flavor notes and that you can bring out of a coffee. And there came a point where I just kind of crossed a bridge, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to learn how to like coffee, and I'm going to stop cold turkey, no cream and sugar. And took 2 weeks. And after that 2 weeks, the thought of putting cream and sugar in the coffee, it was radical 180-degree turn. It became I won't say an obsession, but it became something that I had to taste every single coffee, good or bad. I had to taste it. I had to determine what its flavor notes were being. We earlier we were talking about OCD tendencies, and that's me. I had to taste every kind of cup of coffee that there is, determine what happened, come up with a diagnosis, good, bad, or otherwise, of what's going on. And yeah, it became a passion, a keen interest of mine, and something that I think about all the time, and just basically a fascination.
At some point, it turns into something that you move into as a career. But before I ask about that, there had to be something that made you decide that you were going to leave public education. Was there a tipping point there that made you think that? Was it just an opportunity presented that you were going to go a different direction? What happened to make you think I'm going to veer off this path that I've been on? Especially, I have a little experience in that education field. There's a track that people can get on and go right through to retirement, and you veered off of it. Why'd you do that?
There are a couple of reasons. When I made that decision, I was a school administrator, and of course, I was seeing a side of life that most people don't. I had made a determination that my kids were not going to be subject to a lot of the, especially negative socialization that happens with peers. And I decided we're going to homeschool our 6 kids. And so, yeah, I mean, we've raised our kids. They went K-12, I have 3 college graduates, and they're all been very successful. But I just did not want them to have those negative influences. Secondly, from an entrepreneurial perspective, I wanted to leave a legacy for my kids, and if they wanted to have the opportunity to move into a family business, you really can't move into a family government job. Well, not legally, and I wanted something for them to at least have a choice to accept or reject to do something else. But I really enjoy being an entrepreneur and the challenges that come with it. And so those 2 things were probably the biggest reasons why I left public education. School boards don't like it if the principal will not put their kids in the school. They understood my position, but the optics weren't good. And so it just made sense. And it took a couple of years to make the transition. But there came a point where I pulled the trigger and left public education and the security of a regular government paycheck for the exciting ride of entrepreneurial adventures.
The daily thrill of panic and uncertainty.
Yes.
How did you end up specifically with San Francisco Roaster Company? And I might be a little hazy on the details of my history, but that it was a company that already existed, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you purchased.
So the San Franciscan roaster, it was a brand, and I did buy the company there. It came about. I have a couple of brothers that were in the coffee business, and one brother was opening up another Looney Bean in Montrose, Colorado, and so all the brothers kind of came together to help open the store and do this and that. He had purchased a used San Franciscan roaster, and it needed some repairs. And I contacted the owner of the company, and we were able to buy some parts, but not everything, and found out he was closing up shop. Well, at the time, I was still looking for that entrepreneurial opportunity. And so I went to actually talk to him about it. So, what are you going to do with the company? Because he was just going to close up. And so we ended up having a discussion, and 3 months later, moved my family to a little town, Fallon, Nevada. And I started my undergraduate degree is industrial management. So I wasn't entirely, unfamiliar with manufacturing. we just started. We just started with the group. It was put everything on the line. It was an all or nothing proposition for our family. It was it was also 2008, and that was when all the crunches started happening in the economy, and we we made it though. But yeah, I would say a lot of praying, uh, and sometimes that were very very tight through the whole processes, all the processes. It was good. I can look back with fond memories. It wasn't traumatic, it was exciting, it was very exciting. And time after time, things happened just at the right time for us in those earlier years. And we continued growing to what we are today. And we expect to continue growing even that.
I remember 2008 very clearly because we were trying to sell our house as we moved across the country, and it was a rough go of it. My wife and I, quick aside, ended up selling our house and getting a check for $460 profit. And we were grateful because we knew people that weren't. I was in real estate at the time. And we took that $460 and we spent 60 of it on a pizza and beer dinner and put the rest in the bank, and off we went. So it was I remember that
Yeah.
very, very well. Your roasters appeal to me as a person with a background in design because you have integrated both art and functionality. When I see one, I'm drawn to it, and I think that's really interesting because it's not necessarily the first thing you would think of when you're thinking about the efficiency of a coffee roaster or the functionality of the product, but you haven't sacrificed that form over function. I'm wondering why does that design matter into the build and into kind of the ethos of your company? What is important about that you continue to do that when, and I'm not trying to slight another brand or any other thing, but the a lot of other roasters are very streamlined, very stainless steel, very clean lines. There's some of the new ones are essentially boxes with a little hole in it, and you kind of reach in and do your thing. Why did you guys? Why was that important to the company, and why have you continued that over all of these years that you've been in charge?
I have to give credit to my predecessor, just for the bones of the machine. He used to work for one of our competitors, Probot, decades ago, and they have their systems and so on. He's a good old boy from Oklahoma, had a lot of real mechanical genius about him, and it didn't always fit with a large company. And so he came to a point where he was an Oklahoma redneck. They were a German company, and their ideas and precision, and it was a culture clash. And so they parted ways. He ended up starting this company where he was basically refurbishing vintage European roasters, Probot, Somniac, Gotthard, etc., Petrosini. And he'd take these European roasters, he would Americanize them with voltage and frequencies so the motors would turn properly here in the United States, and then he'd resell them. And he came to learn a lot of what were the best aspects of these multiple European brands and what were the worst, especially when it came with cleaning and maintenance. And he told me he had an epiphany one day when he had a sea container full of broken roasters that he picked up for nothing and shipped over from Europe because he still had his contacts with Probot and so on. And they were sent to this little shop in Fallon, Nevada, and he'd go through, and he said he went through and he ended up scrapping, 80%, 90% of that entire container. It just wasn't worth the time to go through and repair those. And he kind of had a little epiphany and decided, oh, I can do my own. So he took all that knowledge. He took his natural mechanical genius, created a prototype, got it certified, and then he started production of a 12 kilo roaster, called it the SF-25. It was, it was going to be an American roaster, so American, measurement systems and so on. And he did that. And that was in 1992, 31 years ago. And he kind of caught the beginning of, the wave of specialty coffee back then. And he built these roasters like a tank. A lot of the conflict he had with his is the modernization, mostly streamlining manufacturing methods, where, let's just say, the heavy cast iron, it was too costly to do that. Cast iron has wonderful heat diffusion characteristics. It's also a very brittle metal, and so it has to be very thick and so on. And some of the design changes were just in alignment with manufacturing improvements in industry generally. And so you can manufacture a coffee roaster as fast as Whirlpool can make a dishwasher. And that's what was going on. He worked against that. That's when he left, and then he took over, doing the refurbishing, and then he designed his own roaster. He built it like a tank, but he eliminated the cast iron and went with mild carbon steel, but very thick plate. Just like I said, literally bulletproof. And so he did that, and then his son didn't want to follow in his footsteps, and so I discussed, I found the opportunity. We worked a deal and moved my family to Fallon, and I started working, building the roasters. The art and function. Now, my brother owned one of these when he bought the coffee house in Mammoth Lakes in Looney Bean. It was like the sixth roaster that my predecessor had built. And he had this, and that's when I started roasting. I was a middle school administrator, and it was great therapy to sit and roast coffee and hear the whoosh, 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 whoosh of the beans in the drum, and pay attention to the development. And again, at first, it was turning green beans brown, and hopefully you pull them out of the roaster before you have a fire. I mean, that level of knowledge, but it grew from there, and we got better and better at it. And then, lo and behold, a few years later, I owned this company that built that roaster, and that was a cool transition for me. But I've always loved old stuff. I've always loved stuff that was built solid. In my office, I have a 120-year-old GE brass blade fan that still works, and it's an art piece, but yet mechanically and electrically, it still works. It'll still blow the papers off my desk. It says people don't make stuff like that anymore. It's really a throwaway culture, and I purposed I'm gonna continue making things like I was gonna personally own that device that we make and how I would want it to be. And then I impart that to our clients. And I think we do a pretty good job at that. And as we've grown, we've been able to maintain a good reputation, good customer service in that regard. And I'm reticent to say it on a podcast, but, since I've owned the company for the last 15 some years, if you call during non-business hours and you hit option 1, it goes to my cell phone. And I still do that because I get that few calls. Sometimes I get a call from, the Middle East or Europe in the middle of the night, waking me up asking for pricing or something like that. But yeah, if I'm awake, I'll answer the call. And I've been on that side of the fence where if you have any downtime and you got a big order to put out, I'll do what I can to help you put out that order if you can.
I have to share this story with you, actually. The reason that I reached out to San Franciscan to invite you on this show in the first place is another guest of mine, and I don't want to be quoted on this, even though I'm quoting myself, but I think it was John Pearson at Servant Coffee in Denver. He told me that when he was first getting into the business, he was looking for a roaster, and he didn't have any experience one way or another. And he called San Franciscan and you answered the phone you were on some trip somewhere, and he didn't realize until halfway through the conversation that you had picked up the phone, despite the fact that you were maybe in Asia or somewhere. I don't know who it was. But the idea that he called and someone answered the phone meant so much to him that he decided to go that way. And if I'm wrong on the roaster, I apologize. The idea of building things to last, I personally love. I think there's a demand for it from people my generation and younger. I'm in my 40s, my brother's in his 30s, and we both kind of have this conversation all the time where, I bought a washing machine and 2 years later it doesn't work. And not only does it not work, but nobody wants to fix it, or it's going to cost me twice as much to fix it as it is to replace it. And it's like, my parents were still using the same washing machine that I grew up with as a kid, and, it was fine. And so I think there's that demand. We just need to get a wave of consumers to keep pushing for those things. So I certainly appreciate that. It kind of leads me to this question about success. Success is hard to sustain. You mentioned you've been doing this since '08, and I'm guessing at some point there were some tough times and lows. You mentioned that, where things were tight. What advice could you give people listening just on maintaining belief that your course is right? That you said you put it all on the line. I mean, at some point, do you go, maybe I should have put it on a different line? How would you address that?
I would say, from an entrepreneurial point of view, one, make sure you believe in what you're doing. And if you do, and I did, and I believed in the values behind what we were doing, you just have to have grit, determination, perseverance, and endurance. And, our marketing, advertising, young lady, her father's a Nevada rancher. And we were talking about this just the other day. And she said, yeah, my dad, he would go, he says, what you do is you get it done or you get it done. Those are your choices. And you just do it. You just do it. And of course, obviously, sometimes you're going to reach a point where it's clearly not going to be sustainable, and failure is your only option for that. But in any entrepreneurial enterprise, where you take failure is you just learn from it and you start your next opportunity. And so that, failures can happen. Even within a business as it's growing, without having to fail the entire business. But this is where the grit and the determination is, seeking counsel and making things going. Money is nice, capital is king, but people, banks, it's like when you need the money, they're not going to lend it, and when you don't need the money, they're all over you. But it's when you need the money. But money isn't always the solution. Sometimes not having the money requires you to, again, knuckle down and find a smarter solution to accomplish the same thing instead of throwing money at it. And this is where you just learn wisdom from, in an entrepreneurial enterprise like that. And then surround yourself with a great team. People that are humble, they're willing to do whatever it takes to make the enterprise succeed, and they're hungry to, they will work hard, and they're great team players. They know when to speak and when not to, and you just build a cohesive team as your organization grows. And that helps you weather the hard times. I mean, everybody went through hard times the last 3 years with the pandemic. And, some people got relief from the government. And, that was necessary with the government mandated shutdowns. The government took care of, the people just to help as many people stay in business as possible. But, now we're past that. And we're still in uncertain times. In my business, coffee, I got to share a little story. One of the guys that worked for me years ago, he he grew up in Fallon, and as a high schooler, he did some work for an older couple, and at the end of the job, the older fella said, "Hey, can I pay in silver dollars? Because we're short on cash." I said, "Sure." So I gave him a few silver dollars, and he noted that the old fella had a silver dollar little hole drilled on it, and it was on his keychain. And he said, "There you go, a silver dollar on your keychain." And the fella said, "Yep. That way I know I always have a cup of coffee, enough money for a cup of coffee." And so for me in the coffee business, coffee is that simple pleasure that people are going to hang on to through thick or thin. And so people want to meet that need across this country. It's my hope that we can help these smaller entrepreneurs jump into something where they can meet that need. That's one of the other fascinating things about coffee. Incredibly complex, organic, and yet it brings so much pleasure to people. And I like to build, our roasters so that we can help our clients, meet their clients' needs as best they can.
Well, that brings us to this concept of the future and how things are changing. I think the coronavirus impacted every business. Everyone is kind of aware of that. We've talked about it a lot on this show. If I'm not mistaken, a lot of the building of your machines happens here in the United States. I'm wondering how manufacturing in America was either kind of challenging or was a benefit during that time. And then as we're going forward, you know what? I'm gonna hold that off. I'd rather just address kind of the idea that you're doing this work here, which is something I've heard from a couple other coffee industry people that surprised me when so many manufacturing in particular industries are not. How did that benefit you or challenge you over the last 3-4 years?
Well, yes, from a cost accounting point of view, sometimes it's easier to accept a poor quality component if you outsource it overseas. And I was just never going to do that. Our philosophy is always going to be 100% American made. We make sure that the steel that we receive is domestic, mined, refined, and milled in the United States of America. We find that the American steel is superior to any other steel from other parts of the world that can be produced more cheaply. And there are a number of reasons for that. But one, it has to be American made. Two, there's a culture and a sense of pride in maintaining an organizational kind of tight knit organization, and that sense of pride in the work that's done by all of the people in the organization is manifest in the product that they put out. So there's so many different levels of, let's just say, natural control. It's not controls that are enforced by punishments if there's things done wrong, but they're kind of intrinsic controls that everybody has because they really want to put out the best product possible. And that's part of the American culture and the nature of America, taking pride in workmanship. And really, there's a joy that comes with that. And that joy translates into superior quality that I think you find in American craftsmanship than you find in other places in the world. And again, I don't want to be disparaging at all because everybody has their cultures and everything. But what I find unique about the American experience is that attitude. That attitude that we're the best and we're going to strive to be the best. And if someone beats us, well, dadgummit, we're going to beat them back and they're going to do it better. It's that kind of a competitive spirit that's not angry. It's almost fun. It's okay. I see what you did there. I'm going to do it better. There's a sense of ingenuity. I put that on the side plaques of the San Franciscan roaster. All of them have the phrase art and ingenuity. And, that goes with the craft of roasting coffee, but it also has to do with the approach we take to manufacturing our coffee roasters. One, I will say this, and I know it's me saying it, but we have the most attractive coffee roaster in the world. We just do. And I will argue till I'm blue in the face with anybody who says otherwise. And I will still be right. And and that's how and we'll always be that way. Two, we're always looking ways to be, to exercise levels of ingenuity to make it so that it's as ergonomic as possible for our clients, while at the same time encouraging our clients to not push a button and turn coffee roasting into basically wait till you hear the beeper and then take the fries out of the oil like you hear the beepers at McDonald's. It's a lot more complex like that. Now there's a place for coffee roasters like that. And so I don't want to, detract from business models that do that. But our particular niche in this market are for people who are passionate about coffee. They're passionate about the craft, and they're willing to spend the time that it takes to understand what happens during the roast process, and to embrace that and to produce a very fine coffee for their retail clients or their wholesale clients, to make that simple pleasure happen, like that old fella had. That longing, or that he was always going to keep that silver dollar on his keychain so he could always be insured of that simple pleasure. And so we're seeking to make sure that that simple pleasure is fulfilled for our clients and for their clients too. And again, it's a culture, it's a process, it's a pride in craftsmanship, it's a pride in making things beautiful, pleasing to the eye. The look of the roaster just by itself adds, and there's a theater about it. There's an ambiance that it brings to a coffee house. We have one up in Virginia City, and that people take their picture next to that coffee roaster all day long during the busy seasons, because, like I said, I'll go blue in the face. We have the best looking coffee roaster in the world.
Well, your roasters are often showpieces in especially smaller independent coffee roasters that I've been in. I certainly have more than a few photos of them on my camera roll. I find that I end up gravitating towards them. So I haven't looked at every roaster, so I can't 100% agree with you. But I do think that when I see one, I'm naturally drawn to it for its attractiveness.
Yeah, and just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it's not going to happen eventually. So and there are always new roasters coming out of different parts of the world, and they look a lot. No one can really match what we've done, though. I see roasters with lots of lights and switches and displays and whatever, and I joke with folks. I said, look, the more your coffee roaster looks like a lit up Christmas tree, the more they're trying to compensate for what they're not doing right on the inside. And we really, really work hard on the metallurgy and the heat diffusion characteristics, so that you can distribute heat convectively, conductively, with radiant heat. And you have a broad diversity of heat applications, because each one will bring a different aspect to the flavor notes of the coffee during different parts of the roasting process. So we spent a lot of time with that. And again, the type of person that embraces the roasting that we facilitate is someone who is going to be passionate about the coffee, and they're looking really hard at the craft, to just like, let's put it this way: you get a really good coffee, and you have a couple of impressionist painters, and you have a Monet, and then you have Van Gogh. Both of them, go to the Louvre, check out their paintings, go to the Art Museum in London on Trafalgar Square, and you can stare. I mean, I remember staring at the sunflowers from Van Gogh for 45 minutes, and then looking at the Lily Pond that Monet did, and I couldn't stop staring at it. Totally different, both impressionists, but different approaches to art. And coffee is very much the same way. And my goal is to make a coffee roaster so that if you have an artist that puts out, their version of a Monet in the coffee cup, and you have another roaster that puts out their version of Van Gogh in a coffee cup, they're still meeting the desire that people have for that simple pleasure. But it's still a Monet, it's still a Van Gogh. And we want to be able to facilitate for that for people. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but it's a culture, it's a mindset. I won't go as far as to say it's a spirituality. I suppose some people could say that too. Let's put it this way. It goes to the soul. And I've sold roasters to larger organizations, and they will have one brand that mass produces coffee that typically goes on grocery store shelves and stuff like that. And they'll say, yeah, that roaster has no soul, but your roaster does. And so I think that, as a metaphor, kind of that describes how we're set apart from other manufacturers. Not to say that other coffee roasters can be more efficient. There's more things you can touch or buttons, less capability required on the operator, to roast coffee a certain way. There's all kinds of automation and stuff that's available. We can go that way, but I'm measured about how far we go that way because I really want it to be part of the human experience, both in roasting the coffee and then enjoying the coffee that was roasted on our machine.
It reminds me of the argument between an automated strike zone in baseball. Is there a relationship between the roaster and the machine, or is that roaster, anyone could step into that spot and hit those buttons? And the idea that having a relationship between a person and the tool that they're using, I think in theory, the idea is that it would imbue some of that spirit and some of that effort and some of that craft that you mentioned into the product that they're producing. And as a consumer, whether you realize it or not, you are experiencing that, you're feeling that, hopefully. That does bring up the point you mentioned, automation, and I'm thinking about this kind of point we are at in the world. I'm sure every generation believes they're at the tipping point. That seems to be a commonality, but with the discussions about climate change and sustainability and our discussion today about a building to last, how does SFR and the industry generally, where do you see that going? How does that impact your decision making for the future in the coffee industry, which is really unique in that it connects pretty much every corner of the world? There's a few non-coffee drinking areas, but for the most part, coffee is drunk almost everywhere in the world. And that coffee community is only growing in places like India and China and, huge population centers. And yet it seems like the places we can grow coffee is also shifting and the need for sustainability is growing. How does your company fit into that?
Yeah, well, we're kind of a drop in the bucket as far as market share or where we fit in the world. We're still one of the last. We're probably one of the last closely held companies that are still family owned. That aren't corporate. So there's a couple things. One, yes, of course, we want to be good stewards with everything. Interestingly, we have, our larger roasters require, smoke and fume mitigation. And we've always had an afterburner on our 12 kilo since the very beginning, back in the early 90s, that was capable of basically using a smaller incinerator to incinerate the smoke and fumes that came off the roaster. And then in the exhaust that came off the incinerator from the basically incinerating the smoke and fumes from the hot air, we basically repurposed that heat, reused that heat to mitigate the smoke and fumes that came off the cooling air. The cooling air would obviously that air is drawn from the environment and pulled through the beans to help cool them as soon as the roasting process is done, so that you can, well, for lack of a better term, lock in the flavors, and keep the coffee from continuing to roast in your cooling tray. But, you're still pulling a lot of steam. The fumes of the roast are still coming off of there, still smoke from the beans, especially at the beginning of the cooling cycle. And but introducing that heat into the hot air stream after the afterburner, that hot air will incinerate all that cooling air. And so we have a smaller afterburner that's about 1/3 the size of what it would need to be if it took both air streams and ran them through together before the afterburner, where actually we run a single air stream through the afterburner and then reuse that exhaust heat to mitigate the airstream from the second. And so we've always kind of been, environmental before it became a thing. We just have always wanted to do that because it would save energy. We had the gas crisis back in the 70s and that kind of thing. So, saving on fossil fuels has always been kind of in the mindset there. So we've always kind of mitigated that. There are other devices nowadays that can help mitigate. It doesn't mitigate 100% like a thermal oxidizer will, or what is known in the industry as an afterburner. But they do really well in mitigating, water scrubbers. There's a company called Vortex that does that. Other or electrostatic devices that will basically zap the smoke particulates out of the airstream. They don't do so great on the VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, the smells, the fumes. But again, there's a lot of different other devices now that didn't exist before.
I was just going to say, just listening to you talk about this, and some of the science and some of that technical stuff goes right over my head. But I've always kind of felt that in a lot of ways, thinking ahead, environmentally friendly or whatever you want to call it, concerning yourself about things like climate change, even if you don't believe in that or you don't buy into that or that's not something you care about, it seems to lean towards good business to be aware of, I'm going to make my product use less energy than more, or I'm going to invest in things that make things more efficient. You mentioned early in that last answer that you're one of the last family-owned companies, and we talked earlier about you had 3 kids that are college graduates and successful, and you also mentioned, I'm bringing a lot of this all around here near the end, about how you as a entrepreneur wanted to leave something, a legacy of some sort, that they could choose to be part of or not. I'm wondering if any members of that family have come on board with you and are part of this current iteration of San Franciscan.
Well, being a homeschool dad, all of my kids have been involved in the business as soon as they were old enough to be involved in the business. So, my 3 older ones, whether they were, one of my daughters is more business, finance, accounting, so she worked a lot in that. 2 of my sons are currently, they're working as an apprentice with one of our journeyman fabricators, and they're learning the craft. It would be their shop, if you would, equivalent. So they're welding, they're fabricating, they're using equipment in the machine shop, and so they're learning a valuable skill in that regard. As far as wanting to jump in, I would say they're probably all still a little bit young for that to decide. I think everyone has an interest here or there, but they're pretty early on in their career. And part of my thought was part of their education too is work for a big company, big companies with big budgets that have big budgets to create best practices, and then learn big best practices, that they can bring back to a small company, so that we're not a mom and pop, so to speak. We are a good process with good, or a good company with good processes and methodologies and so on. And so I would say that my oldest kids are in that phase, where they're just into corporate, larger companies. One is an engineer, one is going to be working in one of the big four accounting firms, and one is getting married, and so good for her. She's going to get married, and that's what she wants to do. She wants to get married, be a mom, and more power to her. And then I still have three that are still not in college, but they're thinking about it, and they know that that opportunity exists. And so if it turns into a legacy thing for them to step into, it will. And by the time they graduate, who knows if the older kids will want to either stay in a corporate field or if they want to do something entrepreneurial. The nice thing about an enterprise like this in manufacturing is you do have a lot of different skill sets necessary to make the entire team work. And so their interests, they won't have to deny their interests. Engineering, accounting, marketing, sales, all those kinds of things.
I have two brothers, and I think we grew up in the restaurant industry with our family. And I think we all at some point said, well, we're going to get the hell out of here and go off into the world. And I always believed I'd go out into the world and get a real job and not work in that industry again. And somewhere along the line, I came back to the restaurant industry, not working necessarily with the family. They weren't in that anymore, but all of those skills I learned as a kid came back around as an entrepreneur and the things that I've done. And now my two brothers and I, we all three of us are entrepreneurs. We all own our own businesses, and we've all kind of put one foot into that world and then came back. And I can't say as to why that is. Certainly not everyone does that, but I think there's an interesting, we talked about belief earlier. I saw my parents do it, and I know how hard it was. I know what it felt like when things were tight. And I still have this desire to try to do it myself. And I've been through a big entrepreneurial failure, and it was hard and it was scary, and certainly has made me hesitate a few times. But I also know the reward of that feeling when I leave at the end of a day. I don't ever leave; I'm always at work. But
yes,
but I know what that feeling is like when I've done something that I'm proud of, and it's selfishly, it's mine. I did that, and I can leave that behind and feel good about it. I've taken you well beyond the time that I told you I was gonna steal you from your world. I would be remiss though if I didn't ask you if you didn't have a piece of advice for an entrepreneur, someone like myself or anyone listening, a lesson that you've kind of taken with you over the last 15, 16 years or you've acquired moving forward. What advice would you give to someone who was in the position you were, 15 years ago?
I would say, it doesn't really matter what you go into. Actually, it doesn't really matter if you have an actual passion for something, that's kind of like the coffee thing for me. I would say, though, that if that's what you want to do, seek counsel and jump in. Now, I sought counsel, and everyone told me, don't go into manufacturing because all the manufacturing is going overseas. I kind of resisted that and bucked against it, and, it's working. And because I do know that people seek value. And the other thing I would say is that whatever you do, you're going to create something that value is going to be recognized by your client. And you need to be able to communicate that value, because people will part with their money if they see the value, whatever it is. If you charge more than somebody else, but they think that X, Y, and Z are pretty much, there's no difference between X, Y, and Z, and you have Z and it's twice as much money, then they'll choose X and Y. If they choose Z, though, it's because Z portrays themselves as not equal to X and Y, but the value is there. So you're going to have to learn how to communicate the value. Be careful on your pricing. Don't go too cheap, though, because people, if you don't charge enough, sometimes people won't buy because they think it's cheap. But part of pricing is your communication of value too. But obviously, you don't want to overcharge either.
or you'll price yourself out of the market. And then grit, determination. Persevere, persevere, persevere. And like the old rancher said, you have two choices: get it done or get it done. And you kind of have to have that mindset. And don't be afraid.
All good things. Honestly, I'm getting way more out of this than you are today. I can tell you that. Did we miss anything that you want people to know about your company, about you, about what you've been accomplishing? Is there something I should have asked that I didn't?
Well, I could totally go into a sales pitch, but I don't really want to do that. I think people do who are serious about being an entrepreneur do a lot of research naturally. It's going to be hard work regardless. But yeah, hey, I would prefer that you talk to all of our competitors, as long as you include us in one of those, because we may not be your best choice, okay? And we may be your best choice, but you don't have the capital, So let us help you find something else or different. At the end of the day, it's I can walk away from a client, and honestly tell them maybe we're not the best choice for you, just as easily as a client can walk away from us too. And I think that's an important balance. It's you're making yourself vulnerable, but the client needs to know that I'm not going to sell something and manipulate them at all costs. I think it's important to treat people as, honor people and honor their choices. And I think that honor will be returned back to you if you do it that way. And that said, I'm not going to go into my pitch. I'm going to let you let the listener, if you have an interesting coffee roasting, give us a shot, talk to us, and then talk to everybody else. Not everybody, but the people in who the good brands are, and who the cheap brands are. I would say avoid the cheap brands. You're always going to get what you pay for. And if you don't pay for it now, you're going to be paying for it continually. You just are throughout the life of that piece of equipment. I would encourage you, whatever brand you go with a good brand, a brand that's got a great reputation, and a brand that's going to be robust enough to grow with you for a lifetime. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, then the last question that I have asked all except for one guest who I just forgot, and I regret it every day. If you were to go down the street and stop into a coffee roaster, what do you order to drink?
Oh, what do I order? And I'm pretty plain. I order what everybody else orders, what the majority, and it's just a straight cup of coffee. And I do like what I said before. I give it the analysis. I'm a Q grader, so I know how to grade coffees and all that. And I just have to put myself through that experience. And it's the most common experience that coffee roastery would have their customers. That's what I go for first. Personally, I just really enjoy the French press method and the mouthfeel and everything. I always leave the mud at the bottom of my cup, but I just have to. To me, that gives me the broadest experience of that cup, and so.
We're on the same page there. I always espouse my love for the French press on the show. Bill, thank you so much for spending an hour with me and talking about you and about your company. And I'm grateful for all the thoughts and advice that you gave.
Well, this has been a delightful experience, Ryan, and I guess everybody likes to talk about themselves anyway. I just don't do it that often, and so it's refreshing. But it also, I think, in the reminiscing, you look back and you get that sense of satisfaction in knowing that, yeah, I've been through these really hard times. I'm at where I'm at. I'm in this hard time and I'm in this good time, but life is good, and I like where I'm at. And thank you for letting me talk through that.
Well, I only did it because I assume you're going to call me tomorrow and ask about me.
You know what? Yeah, I will start a podcast. I'll call it The Other Wildlife.
Okay, to recap, I told you, there was a lot of poignant advice coming from Bill's side of the conversation. I'll share a lot of it on roastwestcoast.com, but I can't wait to reshare one piece of advice that he had for entrepreneurs. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Bill said in order to make it, you need to make sure you believe in what you're doing, have grit, perseverance, and endurance. It might sound really simple when I repeat it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't help to hear it over and over again. I know it made an impact on me. I'm going through the entrepreneurial journey right now with this podcast. Despite the name, San Franciscan Roaster Company is based in Carson City, Nevada. Bill moved his family near there after purchasing the company from the original owner, who was planning on just shutting it down. This was in 2008. If you were adulting back then, you might remember it was a fairly hectic economic moment. The decision to purchase San Franciscan Roaster Company was an all-or-nothing proposition for Bill's family. It was also a big change for Bill, who had been in the education field. It was a decision fraught with risk. But at its core, it was an opportunity to work in coffee, which had become a pursuit he couldn't ignore. Things have worked out, in part because San Franciscan is actively working to make really durable, effective, and attractive coffee roasting machines, the kind of machines that generate brand loyalty and advocates. It's also working in part because, to quote Bill, time after time, things happened just at the right time. There can be multiple approaches to art that is successful, in the same way that there can be multiple approaches to roasting coffee. Whoever is roasting is doing so in their own unique yet excellent way. Bill and the team at SFR are striving to be the tool that gets them there. No other interviewee on this show has referenced the art of Monet or Van Gogh when trying to explain where they fit into the long lineage of coffee. Neither of those artists became famous painters without the cave painters of the Paleolithic era, roughly 3 million years ago, who assembled the first rudimentary tools designed to transfer red and yellow clay to the stone walls of their homes. Finally, and because I can only hear it in the iconic voice of Wilford Brimley, guest starring as the Postmaster General Henry Atkins on Seinfeld, you either get it done or you get it done.
Mr. Kramer, I've been reading some of your material here. I got to be honest with you. You make a pretty strong case. I mean, just imagine an army of men in wool pants running through the neighborhood handing out pottery catalogs door to door. Well, it's my job. And I'm pretty damn serious about it. In addition to being a postmaster, I'm a general. And we both know it's the job of a general to, by God, get things done.
That is the bottom line in the life of all entrepreneurs. How you get there is up to you. Head to sanfranroaster.com to learn more about the company and follow at sanfranroaster on Instagram to see their posts and reposts from roasters like this show's sponsor Ignite Coffee Company of San Franciscan roasting machines in action. I have to admit, I love the look of the SFRs. If you're enjoying this podcast, you can also follow at Roast West Coast. Though, I'll be honest, you'll see more cool coffee content, learn more, and have a chance to be inspired by entrepreneurs if you head to roastwestcoast.com and subscribe to this show's newsletter. If the headlines are to be believed, it may be one of the few newsletters left that isn't written by an AI bot. I'm not saying it's as good as a bot's, but I do write it myself. Just kidding about the good part. It's so much better than a bot could do. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple or one of the other gazillion podcast platforms, you can find all the links I referenced in this show's podcast notes. And if you're listening and looking for coffee education, check out our other podcast, Coffee Smarter. It's specifically designed to improve your at-home coffee brewing skills and to encourage you to appreciate your going out to the cafe experience. This show is supported by a cadre of roast industry partners. They are Café Laterre, Camp Coffee Company, Coffee Cycle Roasting, Ignite Coffee Company, Maria Coffee, First Light Whiskey, Cape Horn Coffee Importers, Zumbar Coffee and Tea, Ascend Coffee Roasters, Mostra Coffee Company, and Steady State Coffee Roasting. This episode of the Roast West Coast Coffee Podcast has been written, produced, and recorded by me, Ryan Wolt. Thanks to Bill Kennedy and Victoria Wyerock at San Franciscan Roaster Company. I'll look forward to meeting yous in real life at SCA Portland, booth 253. To those of you listening today, thank you for being here. I hope this episode has found you happy, healthy, and with at least a thread of sanity, enabling you to make it through the day. Always tip your baristas, and be sure to drink good coffee. This podcast is supported by Coffee Cycle Roasting in Pacific Beach, San Diego, where they love two things: making great coffee for you and riding bicycles. Oh, and dogs, and vegan pastries. So 4 things. At Coffee Cycle, they love those 4 things. But also seeing the smiling faces of their neighbors, uplifting local artists, and creating a welcoming space for everyone to get a coffee or a tea that was truly crafted and cared for. So, those 7 things. Only those 7 things. And, well, they also love sharing coffee education, and talking about books, and going on group bike rides up big hills, and cruising along the beaches. And this is getting ridiculous. At Coffee Cycle, they love coffee, and they love making people happy. Everything fits into those 2 buckets. If you love them back, and you love the best coffee ever, subscribe to one of their monthly coffee subscriptions on coffeecycleroasting.com. House roasts, single origin, and bulk offerings are available because they want to make sure you're never short on coffee. Subscribe or make a one-time coffee order at coffeecycleroasting.com.